Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, or at least that's what they say to try and sound cool. The truth of the matter when it comes to movies and fight scenes is that beauty lies in the hands of the stunt choreographers and visual effects artists. So, with that in mind, today the TV Region presents to you the top 25 most visually stunning fights in the movies.
You know what's cooler than magic? Math!
What better way to kick things off than with a lesson in mathematics? To be honest with you, I don't really know whether it was geometry, trigonometry, or whatever else that Spider-Man uses in this scene, but I do know that it was one heck of a display. The real MVP of this battle is actually Doctor Strange, as he totally dominates and toys with Peter Parker for about 90% of the fight. The visuals he showcased were truly of the level of the Sorcerer Supreme. Sorry Wong, but look, facts are facts. Now, Spidey may have used the power of maths against Strange, but the laws of physics totally went for a toss with all the dimensional changes and prism formations. I don't really care much about the outcome of this battle because I was too busy being mesmerized by the effects. But yeah, then Spider-Man came up with some kind of solution to the whole thing. Yeah, the pun is very much intended. I wonder if Sherlock would have been able to counter this though. Maybe Benedict Cumberbatch could have switched characters to bamboozle us even further.
Don't do this. Ow.
I'm sorry, sir, but...
The Sorcerer's Stone may have given us the first encounter between Harry Potter and Voldemort, but it wasn't until the Goblet of Fire that we actually got to see the both of them actually have a proper go at each other. Well, even here, it's primarily Voldemort who's being flamboyant with his powers, but once Harry has the power of dead parents by his side, bro is unstoppable. The visuals of this scene are carried primarily by the lights emanating from the spell beams of both fighters, but the scene totally intensifies once those blue spirits turn into Harry's parents that urge him to just keep going. This is where Harry Potter is better than Batman, you see. After seeing his deceased mother by his side, bro got stronger and took on the most powerful villain of his universe head on, instead of crying like a little girl upon simply hearing her name. But yeah, I also want to mention the setting of this scene. The dark background and eerie surroundings make the wand beams look a lot better because of the contrast. The production designers definitely knew what they wanted for this battle. Speaking of dark settings, here's the DCEU doing what it's always been known for. The fight between Dr. Fate and Sabbac was an intense one, which kinda got hustled because of the constant back and forth with Black Adam's escape, but if we just focus on the main fight, it's nothing short of a visual spectacle. We all know the kind of power someone like Dr. Fate holds, but the way he shows it off against what can only be called the Son of the Devil is pretty badass. The golden shine of his power beams perfectly complement the color tone of the entire film, and it matches the armor of his costume as well. Sabbac, on the other hand, looks cool simply because of his character design, but I will give props to whoever thought it would be a cool idea to highlight that Illuminati logo on his chest. Yeah, it's a shame that Fate loses this encounter, but at least we got some nice effects out of it. Also, Pierce Brosnan was around 69 years old when he shot this film, and he was the most visually appealing aspect of the whole scene. This is easily the best scene in the entire film, and I mean that in each and every aspect. Since this list is only about the visuals though, I'm going to try to focus on just that particular factor. It's not hard to understand Shang-Chi's grand finale being here because, well, for one, the designs of both the dragons are on point. The Great Protector looks like the live-action version of something straight out of Studio Ghibli, and the Dweller in the Darkness looks exactly like what his name suggests. Also, the almost fantasy-level setting and the nature overdose totally enhances the experience of watching an elegant dragon taking on a hellspawn monster. The section where the Dweller in Darkness tries to drain the Great Protector has to be the highlight for me, you know, because it had me on the edge of my seat. If that dude managed to get this power, he probably would have made for a stronger villain than Doctor Doom. Say it with me as loud as you can. Andrew Garfield's Superman is amazing. I can probably make an entire video justifying that statement, but for now, we'll just stick to his epic final battle against Electro. Once again, it's the color combination of blue and black as we see Electro dishing out endless shocks against the dark background of their battle zone. Keep in mind that since this area is the power station, Spider-Man was essentially having to take on the electrical supply of an entire city. There are so many moments here that make you want to kiss the special effects artist, but my highlights will be the slow motion evasions and then the eventual defeat of Electro when his blue electricity gets countered by Gwen Stacy's genius. On a separate note, I really liked how Electro managed to sneak in the itsy bitsy spider line in the middle of such an intense encounter. The Lord of the Rings is undeniably one of the greatest film trilogies to have ever existed. The Hobbit, though, not so much. However, there's a brilliant scene that involves Galadriel, Saruman, and Elrond taking on a bunch of ghost warriors. It gets a lot of things right when it comes to making such a brutal moment so extravagant, and yeah, I would have loved to see Gandalf in action as well, but you can't have everything your way now, can you? What really stands out is the final surge of energy that Galadriel releases in order to counter the army of orcs. She looks so badass and vibrant at the same time that you just want to watch her for as long as you can. And no, I don't mean that in a creepy way, okay? Man, Cate Blanchett here knows how to pull off both sides of the coin. She was just as stunning as Hela in Thor Ragnarok, although that's a complete switcheroo on the personality aspect. Ah yes, this is a scene you'll always find me mentioning whenever I'm doing an X-Men video, but the one thing I haven't really spoken about much is the fact that this is actually a pretty nice scene when it comes to the effects. First of all, the character design of the Sentinels is really spooky, but also vibrant. They're made to be almost like chameleons, adapting to the mutant powers being thrown their way. This is exactly why the opening fight scene hits so hard, even from a visual standpoint. We see all kinds of mutants trying to flex their skills on the Sentinels, and it's pretty cool to watch as well. However, when these mutant hunters decide to get serious, the tone of the scene dials it up to 100 in no time. I mean, simply witnessing their transformations to counter their opponents was a spectacle in itself, so the eventual thrashings they hand out were even more impactful. The Incredible Hulk remains the better version of the MCU Hulk simply because of how dangerous he genuinely looked. Also, it has to do with that legendary phase of late 2000s to mid 2010 CGI. Just look at this guy and compare him to the abomination that is She-Hulk. Speaking of abomination, he's the main focus of the fight here as we get to watch two angry green giants battle it out for radiation monster supremacy. Now, the main selling point of this fight that stands out to me from an aesthetic perspective is obviously the fact that both of these beasts look extremely realistic. Then there's also the part where Hulk prevents a chopper from exploding by simply clapping his hands. Now that was an epic moment. I'm sure Arnold Schwarzenegger would also applaud having his favorite vehicle saved from certain doom. But yeah, the whole fight in itself was a spectacle, and I'm hoping Red Hulk brings back this kind of energy in the new Captain America movie. Remember what I said about CGI during this era in the previous entry? Well, the OG Transformers film is a prime example of that statement, and it really set the standard for what big-budget production should provide to their audiences. The movie was so ahead of its time if we're honestly considering the visual effects. The CGI team for this film should be very proud of themselves, considering what they had to work with in 2007. Their efforts have stood the test of time, and this final encounter is truly amazing. I want to start by mentioning Optimus Prime versus Bone Crusher, because I can't ignore how awesome that sequence looked. Then I just want to give props to the entirety of that immense final battle. There's so much happening here, with multiple transformations, Starscream taking on those fighter jets, and Megatron finally getting defeated. There's so much to enjoy here, even if you decide to leave your brains back home. Well, that's kind of the case with most films nowadays, isn't it? It's fine to consider your work colleagues as friends, but sometimes it would be best not to push that angle if said colleague is the freaking Hulk. The God of Thunder found out a bit too roughly in Thor Ragnarok when he got smashed around by the angry green giant. Once things got serious, it became more of an open playing field. What worked amazingly well in my opinion was when Thor turbocharged himself with all that lightning energy without Mjolnir. It was somewhat expected after looking at the trailers, but even so, watching his eyes light up and have it followed by that surge attack on Hulk was beautiful to watch. Also, I'm not sure what was on Taika Waititi's mind when he decided to choose the color grading for this film, but he damn sure did a good job of it. Man, if Thor would have landed that final strike on Hulk, I'm sure this entry would have gone up a few spots without any doubt. The end is literally the worst part of this fight, and that's a rarity in the MCU. Well, at least up until Endgame. Two of the most common fears in humanity are those of spiders and lizards.
Run!
It's hard to see Vin Diesel in a film that doesn't involve fast cars or family, but here he is in Bloodshot, showcasing how effective nanobots can be. Guy Pearce has pretty much made a name for himself as an evil scientist ever since the days of Iron Man 3, but I'm sure even he wasn't expecting to see such a dramatic and hardcore display. Rey's regeneration could be seen as a power flux as well, but I think we should also appreciate how awesome the entire sequence looks. The main section is when he absorbs that grenade explosion and makes it seem as if it's just another day at work. I think what also helps his case is the ominous look in his eyes. I know this is essentially a modified version of the nanotech Iron Man suit, but I just can't ignore a sight to behold, can I? However, this does lead to a very important and pertinent question. If Vin Diesel can regenerate so easily, why can't he regenerate the hair on his head? I guess the writers weren't family to poor old Vin, because they totally did him dirty here. It's hard to call anything beautiful from 2019's Dark Phoenix, but the final battle between Jean Grey and Vuk sure had a lot to talk about from a visual perspective. The CGI may not have been peak level stuff, but it was definitely the best we'd seen in the past few years, and I also have to hand it to how the sparkles and energy radiation almost became sentient in a way. Seeing Vuk trying to absorb Jean's powers only to explode from overloading totally reminded me of 2003's Hulk with Eric Bana. Anyway, the impetus this gives the film may not have showered the big bucks upon the producers, but it did leave fans like myself impressed. Also, I know the Phoenix forming towards the end of this display was a bit cliche, but I'll still give it points for adding something extra to an already intense moment. On a side note, what's with all the choke in here? Is this some kind of mutant kink that I'm not aware of?
You're wrong. My emotions make me strong.
You can try to Sam Wilson your way as much as you want, but there'll only be one true Captain America, and his name is Steve Rogers. That dude had the skill, he had the determination, and he most definitely had the butt to become what America truly represents. Another thing that's pleasing to watch is the airport battle scene from Civil War, which is why it lands in my top 10 without any doubts whatsoever. There's so much happening in this scene, and even if you take out shock moments such as Spider-Man's entry or War Machine's exit, there's still a lot of work that's been put into the special effects. The fact that everything still looks realistic AF only goes to show that the VFX team was putting in extra hours to ensure the quality of this sequence. Like, Ant-Man genuinely felt like a giant, not some cheap CGI dummy. The same goes for stuff like Iron Man's suit or Wanda's magical blast. They did a lot of damage, but at least they made it look cool. It's interesting to note that Iron Man has shown himself a few times already, but none of them have been from his own solo trilogy. Either way, he totally bosses his fight with the Hulk using his Hulkbuster armor. This was a hyped up fight leading into Avengers Age of Ultron, and it didn't disappoint one bit. First of all, we got to see a truly angry and rampaging Hulk, which is a rare sight nowadays. Then we see an epic transformation where an Iron Man enters the Hulkbuster, and then, well, we witnessed greatness. Whether it was the barrage of punches or even the plasma blast directed at the angry green giant, the detailing of this fight was impeccable, and it only went from strength to strength. Tony Stark really threw everything at Hulk, and that includes a freaking elevator. When that didn't work, he simply decided to smash him down an under construction building. Yeah, I know this is a pretty destructive selection, but sometimes the rarest of beauties can be found in the harshest of fights. If watching Thanos violate the Hulk wasn't good enough to indicate his true power, then this fight against the Avengers at Titan should definitely have put that discussion to rest. I love the design of the Forsaken planet, and then to see stunts being pulled off such as Thanos throwing a freaking moon at Iron Man, that was just extreme stuff. The way he utilizes his Infinity Stones to gain the advantage every single time was also pretty crafty. Now, I won't talk about a certain magical battle because that deserves its own spot, but I will focus on how Iron Man gave Thanos a run for his money. Nobody expected him to win this fight, but Tony Stark made sure to treat us to a whole bunch of different features he could make use of in the nanosuit. The rapid regeneration, the sudden weapon formations, and the lasers all came together to present us with a spectacle. I'm sure you might have been expecting to see this particular battle, and let me just say that your assumptions are totally spot on. Spider-Man Far From Home may have had a predictable villain, but they also had the power of paranoid visuals to further enhance his impact on Peter Parker. Their first battle had all the makings of an evil psychopath confronting his challenger. Of course, it's Mysterio who totally dominates the fight, but that's only because of all the visual tricks he was playing on poor Spidey. I think what really sells it for me is the way they transition between the illusions and actual reality. At one point, even I was getting confused as to what was going on.
What's going on in there?
What?
Yes, the Iron Man skeleton was super creepy and almost had me pissing my pants, but whoever's idea was to include that shot is most definitely a genius. And yes, the final collision with the train was the perfect way to finish the scene and declare Mysterio's easy victory. Man, this must have been super embarrassing for Peter Parker.
And now, you have.
The battle between Superman and the duo of Feora-Ul and Nam-Ek was of epic proportions in so many ways. If I could explain this scene in a single sentence, then it would be the most anime fight I've ever watched in a non-anime movie. The destruction caused is of tremendous levels, and the striking is so deadly. But even then, all the characters just keep going at each other without fail. It's like watching the Demon Slayer Hashiras taking on the upper-ranked demons, but in broad daylight. There are so many explosions, and the shakiness of the punches make it seem all the more painful to the audience, so kudos to Zack Snyder for getting this one right. I also feel that the MCU should have given Thor a similar kind of fight to elevate his persona in front of the audience. Either way, this fight scene just keeps on giving right until the very end, and then it gives more. We come around full circle here now as we're looking at the final battle between Harry Potter and Voldemort as compared to their first encounter, which I covered at number 24. As you'd expect from one of the most popular franchises of all time, this fight had all the makings of a masterpiece. Right from both of them fighting it out while flying to the final one showdown, this sequence was striking to say the least. Yes, there's the surprise demolition of the Serpent by Neville Longbottom, but the main focus remains on how the boy who lived finally manages to defeat the man who feared death. You can hear it in Voldemort's voice as he disintegrates into nothingness in a manner that's eerily similar to how Peter Parker vanishes towards the end of Avengers Infinity War. I wonder if you want to say, "Mr. Potter, I don't feel so good." Speaking of Infinity War, here's the most badass moment from the film as Thor makes a legendary entrance which remains talked about even 6 years after its release. The sparks flying around Thor and the entrance beam in general were so appeasing to the eye that everything else just seems so insignificant. The first drive from Stormbreaker will always remain an iconic shot, and if that wasn't enough, we also have the God of Thunder splitting an infinity beam in half, after which he stabs Thanos in the chest. Yeah, we all know that's a decision he regrets soon after, but the way they showcase the whole thing is pretty damn perfect. At this moment, you feel as if Thor is indeed invincible, and no one can challenge him in the slightest. We just covered Superman vs. Zod's minions not too long ago, so here's Kal-El against the final boss in what I still consider to be Zack Snyder's magnum opus in the DCEU. There's no fight scene that's quite scaled the epic nature of this battle, and this has a lot to do with the fact that it's a decently lit scene. Everything else in this universe is so dark that you can barely see much, even with all those energy blasts. There's so much chaos and collateral damage being done, but you ignore all of that because you're so captivated by these two beasts that you just want to see how it all ends. And oh boy, it sure ends rough. Yeah, they weren't kidding when they decided to name the Avatar sequel Way of Water. There's fantasy creatures, beautiful scenarios, and brutal encounters all over this sequence. Yes, there's an extremely emotional moment as well when Natea met his end, but I won't focus too much on that here. What we should enjoy is the pristine level of visual effects that are seen in this finale. James Cameron may not be the same director he was back in the 80s, but he sure does have a knack for creating visual masterpieces, and this scene is the perfect testament to that statement. Now imagine if they made this into a video game. I'm sure it would have a lot of takers. Disney better give me royalties if they decide to take me up on this idea though. If you were paying attention in the earlier entry covering this scene, then you would have realized that this was going to take the top spot the moment you saw number 2. I just had to separate the Doctor Strange fight against Thanos because that had some of the most stunning effects I've ever watched in a fight. Every single thing that the Sorcerer Supreme does to counter Thanos and his Infinity Stones is a work of art. Even the final attack, where he clones himself endless times to try and defeat the Mad Titan, it was simply spectacular. I don't care if Thanos won the fight, because Strange, he won our hearts. Also, it's kind of apt that he began and ended this video. Hope you liked the video, please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.